Have you ever wondered what really happens behind the closed doors of a hotel room? Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true stories that will make you think twice before checking into your next hotel. These aren't just tales of uncomfortable beds or noisy neighbors. These are stories of terror, of the unexplainable, and of moments that changed 3 men forever. So turn down the lights, and whatever you do, don't look away.
My name is Marcus, and I used to work night security at the Grandview Hotel in Portland. It was an old building, built in 1923, with that classic architecture that tourists love to photograph. What they don't photograph is what happens after midnight, when the hallways grow cold and the shadows seem to move on their own. It was a Tuesday in October when everything changed. I was doing my usual rounds, checking doors, making sure the fire exits were clear. The hotel was at about 60% capacity that night, nothing unusual. But when I reached the 4th floor, I felt it immediately. That feeling when the air gets heavy, like right before a thunderstorm, except we were indoors. Room 427 had a Do Not Disturb sign hanging on the door handle. According to my records, the room was empty. No guest had checked in. I radioed down to the front desk, and Jennifer confirmed it. The room had been vacant for 3 days. We were doing renovations on that floor, so several rooms were blocked off in the system. I should have walked away. I should have called my supervisor, but something pulled me toward that door. I know how that sounds, but I swear I could hear something. Not quite music, not quite voices, more like a humming that seemed to vibrate through the walls themselves. I used my master key and pushed the door open. The room was dark, but not empty. Every piece of furniture had been moved to the center of the room, stacked in this impossible tower that reached almost to the ceiling. The bed frame, the dresser, the chairs, the nightstands, even the television, all balanced perfectly on top of each other. And at the base of this tower, the mattress had been positioned vertically against the pile, like someone was trying to build a barrier. But here's what made my blood run cold. The room was locked from the inside. The chain lock was engaged. I had to force the door open, and when I did, the chain snapped with a sound like a gunshot in the silent hallway. I backed out of the room and called my supervisor immediately. He came up with 2 maintenance guys, and they all saw it too. We checked the security footage. No one had entered that room in 72 hours. The previous guest had been an elderly woman who checked out without incident. We started dismantling the tower, and that's when we found them. Behind the mattress, scratched into the wallpaper in what looked like fingernails, were hundreds of words, the same phrase over and over and over. Don't let me forget again. Don't let me forget again. Don't let me forget again. The handwriting changed throughout. Sometimes it was neat and controlled. Sometimes it was wild and jagged. But it was all the same phrase, carved so deep into the wall that in some places we could see the wood beneath the plaster. The hotel sealed that room permanently. They told guests it was structural damage, that it wasn't safe. But I know the truth. And I know that sometimes, late at night, when I'm doing my rounds, I still hear that humming coming from behind that door. I quit 2 months later. Some things you just can't unsee.
I'm Daniel, a pharmaceutical sales rep. My job has me traveling constantly, staying in a different hotel almost every week. You get used to it after a while. The generic rooms all start to blur together. Same beige walls, same landscape paintings, same tiny bottles of shampoo. Last April, I had a conference in New Orleans. My company booked me at the Rousseau Inn, a boutique hotel in the French Quarter. Beautiful place, historic building, supposedly haunted, but that's every building in New Orleans, right? Marketing for the tourists. I checked in late, around 11 p.m. My flight had been delayed. I was exhausted, just wanted to shower and sleep. The room was on the 3rd floor, room 314. Nice enough. 4-poster bed, exposed brick wall, one of those old armoires instead of a regular closet. I went through my usual routine, unpacked my toiletries, hung up my suits, set my alarm. Then I took a long shower, hot enough to ease the tension in my shoulders from the cramped flight. When I came out, wrapped in the hotel bathrobe, I noticed something odd. My suitcase had been moved. Not much, just a few inches to the left. I figured maybe I had kicked it when I walked by, though I didn't remember doing it. I got into bed and pulled up my phone, scrolling mindlessly through emails and social media. That's when I saw her in the mirror. The armoire had a full-length mirror on the door, positioned so I could see it from the bed, and in that mirror, standing in the corner of the room behind me, was a woman. She wore a long white dress, the kind you'd see in daguerreotype photographs from the 1800s. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her face was turned away from me, toward the wall. I spun around. Nothing. The corner was empty. I looked back at the mirror. She was still there, clear as day, her shoulders rising and falling, like she was breathing heavily. But when I looked at the actual corner with my own eyes, there was nothing but shadows. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told myself it was the exhaustion, the stress. Maybe I had taken my sleeping pills already and forgotten, but I hadn't. The bottle was still on the nightstand, unopened. I watched her in the mirror for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. She didn't move, just stood there, facing the wall, breathing. Then, slowly, her head began to turn toward me. I didn't wait to see her face. I grabbed my phone, my wallet, and my pants, and I ran, didn't even put on shoes. I took the stairs 3 at a time down to the lobby and demanded a different room. The night clerk looked at me like I was insane, standing there in a bathrobe at 1 in the morning, but he switched me to a room on the 2nd floor. The next morning, I asked the front desk about room 314. The woman at the counter got this strange look on her face and asked why I wanted to know. I told her what I had seen. She went pale and excused herself, returning a few minutes later with the manager. He took me to his office and closed the door. Then he told me the story. In 1889, a woman named Céleste Rousseau had lived in that building when it was still a private residence. She was engaged to be married, but on the morning of her wedding, her fiancé never arrived. He had fallen from his horse on the way to the ceremony and died instantly. Céleste, wearing her wedding dress, locked herself in what is now room 314 and stood facing the corner for 3 days straight, refusing to speak or move. When they finally broke down the door, she collapsed and died within hours. The doctors said her heart simply stopped. The manager said they don't advertise the story, but several guests have reported seeing her over the years, always in the mirror, never in the room itself. And she's always facing away, like she's still waiting, still standing in that corner, unable to accept that her wedding day will never come. I finished my conference early and caught the first flight home. I still travel for work, but I always check hotel histories now. Some rooms should stay empty.
My name is Jason, and this happened during what was supposed to be the best weekend of my life. My college roommate was getting married, and he'd rented out a small resort hotel in the Catskills for the wedding party. 20 of us, 3 days of celebration before the ceremony. We arrived on Friday afternoon. The hotel was perfect, one of those renovated old lodges with tons of character. My room was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the forest. I was rooming with another groomsman, my buddy Tyler from freshman year. That first night, we partied hard. Bachelor party stuff, nothing too crazy, but enough that when I finally crashed around 3 a.m., I was out cold. Until I woke up at exactly 4:17 a.m. I don't know what woke me. There was no sound, no movement, but I was suddenly completely awake, and I knew with absolute certainty that something was wrong. Tyler was sitting up in his bed, facing the wall, completely still, not moving at all, not even breathing as far as I could tell. "Tyler?" I whispered. "You okay, man?" He didn't respond, didn't even twitch, just sat there, ramrod straight, staring at the wall. I turned on the lamp between our beds. In the sudden light, I could see his eyes were open, but they weren't focused on anything. They were just staring, blanked and empty, like he was sleepwalking with his eyes open. "Tyler, you're freaking me out!"
I got out of bed and walked over to him. I put my hand on his shoulder, and his skin was ice cold, like he'd been standing in a freezer. The moment I touched him, he started talking, but it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, rougher, with an accent I couldn't place. 7 of them in the walls, 7 of them waiting, 7 of them watching. Can you hear them scratching? Can you hear them calling your names? Tyler, wake up! I shook him hard. His head snapped toward me, and his eyes focused on my face, but the expression there wasn't Tyler. It was someone else looking out through his eyes, someone old and angry and hungry. Then he smiled, and I saw that his teeth were stained red, like he'd been drinking blood. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet and crashing into my nightstand. The sound must have broken whatever spell he was under, because suddenly Tyler gasped and doubled over, coughing and gagging. "What happened?" he managed to choke out. "Why am I so cold?" I told him everything. He didn't remember any of it, swore he'd been asleep the whole time. But when he got up to splash water on his face, we both saw it. His mouth was clean, no blood, but on his pillow there was a red stain, still wet, in the perfect shape of his face. We didn't sleep the rest of that night. We sat with the lights on, talking about anything except what had just happened, waiting for the sun to come up. The next morning, I went to the hotel manager to ask about the history of the building. He was reluctant at first, but when I pressed him, he admitted that the hotel had a dark past. In 1962, a family was murdered in the building when it was still a private home. 7 people, parents, 4 children, and a grandmother. The killer was never caught, and some of the bodies were never found. The investigation suggested they might be hidden somewhere in the walls, sealed up where no one would think to look. The building had been sold and renovated multiple times since then, but every owner reported strange occurrences. Guests would wake up in the night, possessed by voices speaking languages they didn't know, saying things they couldn't understand, always at 4:17 a.m., the exact time the murders were believed to have occurred. Tyler and I checked out immediately. We told the groom we had a family emergency. I couldn't tell him the truth, couldn't ruin his wedding weekend, but I've never been able to forget the feeling of Tyler's cold skin under my hand, or the way those eyes looked at me like prey. We don't talk about it, Tyler and I, but every year, on the anniversary of that night, he sends me a text at exactly 4:17 a.m. It just says, "Still awake?" And I send one back that says, "Me too," because we both know that if we fall asleep at that exact moment, something might climb inside and never leave.
3 hotels, 3 men, 3 experiences that defy explanation. Are these places truly haunted, or is there something about hotels themselves, these temporary spaces where thousands of people pass through, leaving behind fragments of their joy, their sorrow, their fear? I don't have the answers, but I do know this. The next time you check into a hotel, take a moment, look around your room, pay attention to the way the shadows fall. Listen for sounds that don't belong, because behind every closed door there might be a story, and some stories are better left untold. Sleep well, travelers, and remember, you're never really alone in a hotel room.